to this throwback Thirsty Thursday edition of Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm John Tobacco. We're coming today live as we do every single day, noon to 2 Eastern. We're on the downtown Newsmax studios at the Liquid Lunch Outpost right here on Broadway. Lots of things to get into today. It's a Thirsty Thursday. I'm thirsty for everything that's happening in the news and all the great things that are happening in the studio. You might notice I said it's a throwback Thursday also, a little social media term in there. I want to call it a throwback Thursday because to start off today, I cannot believe how quickly the left-wing media has forgotten very recent history where we have Mike Bloomberg, who's the perennial favorite for the establishment over Bernie. You see how they're clearing the way for Mike Bloomberg to run in with his money bags right up the middle. But lightly reporting, almost accepting and justifying. But just 5 years ago, Mike Bloomberg recently came out with a statement saying that he's evolved and he doesn't feel that way anymore and all this other stuff. And just 5 years ago, he was saying that, well, we put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods because that's where all the crimes are and all 90% of the murderers are minorities and we can just Xerox copy them all. And if you throw the minority kids up against the wall and shake them up a little bit, they might not carry their gun with them. They may leave it home. So let's take a look at just a few years ago and Mike Bloomberg's not just position on stop and frisk, but his mental philosophy on minorities.
Why did you say what you said in that 2015 speech?
I don't think those words reflect how I led the most diverse city in the nation. And I apologized for the practice and the pain that it caused.
But why did you say it?
It was 5 years ago, and, it's just not.
First of all, you might think that if you're running for president and you're worth $65 billion, you're throwing around money like it's candy, you might think you'd be prepared for that question and not look like a deer in headlights. And as somebody in the audience in the studio, one of my staff members just said, it looked like he was going to go into a Fred Sanford. It looked like he was going to have a heart attack because he didn't know how to answer the question. And if you notice the end, very meekly said, well, that was 5 years ago. And he outright lied in his written statement where he said, he's evolved and he inherited it and he decreased it by 95%. He should have ended it sooner. Number one, he inherited it. There were 100,000 stop and frisks in New York. He was the mayor by buying a third term for 12 years. What he cites as 95% cut down is in the last 2 years after the city got sued by the American Civil Liberties Union and others. But during that time, stop and frisks were up 700%. And I want to go back to what he said 5 years ago. And we've added in some very, very poignant headlines from that time to show you how he distorted and lied in his original statement. I want you to take a look at this.
5% of your murderers and murder victims fit in one MO. They are male, minorities, 15 to 25. That's true in New York, it's true in virtually every city. And that's where the real crime is. You've got to get the guns out of the hands of the people that get killed. So you want to spend the money, put a lot of cops in the street, put those cops where the crime is, which means in minority neighborhoods. So this is one of the unintended consequences is people say, oh my God, you are arresting kids for marijuana, they're all minorities. Yes, that's true. Why? Because we put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why do we do it? Because that's where all the crime is.
So you may have noticed a couple of things in there. We put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods because that's where all the crime is. It's a pretty absolute statement, if you ask me. It doesn't sound like it's related to stop and frisk. It sounds like it's related to his philosophy as mayor. And by the way, just like a perfectly orchestrated production as the news of this leaks out and festers a little bit, places where they'll talk about it, like here on Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV, 4 African American leaders, political leaders, elected officials have come out, coincidentally, to back Mike Bloomberg. And if he's using any of the tactics he used here to win his 3rd term, overturning the vote of the people, there's probably a nice, hefty Bloomberg presidential campaign office right next to theirs, which is picking up most of the bills. So we'll keep you posted on that. But if you're thinking about Mike Bloomberg as the savior because you don't like Bernie, okay, think again. And this is the guy that they're hoping, if Joe Biden's limping to the finish line, Elizabeth Warren's out of gas, she's out of money, everything else, Mayor Pete and Amy are duking it out, and Bernie is just beating on everyone with his loyal followers. If you think this is your guy, and you're in those minority communities, don't let your left-wing media news sources gloss over this. Like, oh, he tried to do better. He didn't. He was in charge for 12 months, much like Bernie's been in the Senate and the Congress and the mayor. He's been in politics his whole life. But now he's talking about how he's going to do something for racism, but he hasn't done anything in like 30 years, nothing tangible that I can find. But just when you think the president hasn't said it all, okay, the president put a perfect explanation point on this whole topic when he was asked about Bloomberg's changed stance once again on racism.
Look, he's a lightweight. He's a lightweight. You're going to find that out. He's also then Bernie Sanders, because Sanders has real followers, whether you like him or not, whether you agree with him or not. I happen to think it's terrible what he says, but he has followers. Bloomberg's just buying his way in.
Said it perfect. He's a lightweight. And for all you Bernieites out there, keep in mind, the president said it himself. He'd rather run against Bloomberg than Bernie, because Bernie's got real followers. And Mike Bloomberg's like the Pied Piper fairy tale. He just walks down the street throwing cash up in the air, and anybody who wants some cash gets in line right behind him. So I don't know if he's your guy. It sounds like the president would rather run against him, and I tend to agree with him. But that's my 2 cents on things. To kick it off today in the leadoff spot, one of my favorite guests, and also happens to be part of that minority community, Rich Valdes, joins us here today. He's the host of the This Is America podcast. He's also an aide to former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Rich, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
So give me the beat on the street on this stuff. I mean, you're in the media, you're in the politics game. Are people in the minority communities believing this stuff?
Well, I, for one, am not buying it. What I see here is more Bolshevik billionaire BS coming out of Mike Bloomberg. He treats people however he wants to treat them. You can take Donald Trump and you can take Mike Bloomberg, and they treat people incredibly differently. Donald Trump is somebody that you could grab a beer with and have fun with. We all know he's a billionaire playboy that got married some years ago, and now he's in the White House. Mike Bloomberg, stuffy suit, like the president says, mini Mike Bloomberg. He's not going to get his crate to stand on. He's not going to do well on the debate stage, and I don't think he's going to convince minorities.
So everyone's saying now the big move is South Carolina. Joe Biden, South Carolina is the firewall. You know, it's Joe Biden or bust right here for South Carolina. Has he shown you anything at all that people would get behind?
Not yet, but it is early in the game. I mean, we are one primary, one caucus in. He does have strength in the South. This is, I think, going to be the test. If Joe pulls it out, and I don't mean pulls it out like Bernie pulled it out, because Bernie, lost, what was it, 40% of the Bernie bros that he had back in 2016.
Yeah.
So Biden really needs to pull it out right now in South Carolina to come out swinging. If he squeaks by, it's going to hurt him financially. Donors aren't going to buy it.
And for those of you keeping score at home, they were talking about these huge turnout numbers that they're going to have this year. It was basically flat in Iowa, up about 18% on the turnout in New Hampshire. I usually lay into Morning Joe, Rich, as you know, I refer to it as Morning Joke, but they actually had a good stat this morning that the polls that Pete and Amy won at, the turnout was up 18%. And the polls that Bernie was at were only up 12%. So it seems like those two had a bigger turnout, new turnout, than Bernie. So they're saying his turnout wasn't as big. And Donald Trump came up like fractional decimal points below Ronald Reagan for the highest incumbent Republican turnout and vote ever in history.
That's the real story,
That's
John
the story.
Tobacco. The rest of
Exactly.
these guys are at each other's throats trying to go at it for the Democratic nomination, while Donald Trump is truly building on, you're talking about a legacy from 40 years ago. So I'm really, really looking forward to seeing what a general election turnout is going to be for Donald Trump, because I do predict, and I'm not big on predictions, but I do think he's going to really outdo his previous numbers by at least double digits.
And when you see, you got an incumbent in there, right? Like, he's going against William Weld. Like, you don't have to race home to get to the primary. But when you see one of the hugest turnouts of all time, in the history of the modern era, at least, and you see 100,000 plus people out there just to vote in a primary, what they know the outcome is, that should be scary for the left.
It
Rich.
sends a serious message that the president and his campaign are not taking anything for granted. They're out there, they're pressing the flesh, they're raising the money, and in my opinion, they're going to beat them every step of the way.
And lastly, I know you wanted to talk about Rudy a little bit, and what Rudy's direct chain now to hand over information to the DOJ. Should we flip the script on them now and start going after some of these people that broke the law to chase down the president illegally?
Yeah, well, I think it's important that everybody be held to account when we're able to hold them to account. One of the big problems that we face is that so many of the people that are breaking the rules are the same people that made the rules, so they know exactly how to break it. But with that being said, yes, you're referring to my 100th episode where I had a one-on-one with Mayor Giuliani,
That's right.
and he did discuss a lot of the details that are in the report that he's just transmitted to Attorney General Barr. And on Monday, we heard from Attorney General Barr saying that he would consider the information in the report as well as anybody else who had something of value to offer. So I think even if it's for the sake of just correcting the record, we're going to see more come out of this story that's going to continue to exonerate the president.
I think you're right. And you got to check this guy out on the This Is America podcast. Also, for those of you like me who listen to Mark Levin on the way home, when you hear him screaming and yelling at his phone guy, that's
Mr.
him.
Call Screener.
Mr. Call Screener guy. That's him, too. This guy's working day and night. He knows the beat of the street. He knows what people are talking about. Just like my next two guests, where we do my favorite part of the show, we mix it up. Democrat, Republican, thoughtful conversation is had by all. Republican strategist Joe Pignon joins us, and he mixes it up with our favorite, Rob Taub. He's the moderate centrist sentiments for the show, but a great guy indeed. We'll mix it up for you.